There are some early lessons that no one notices that we teach our boys. We start teaching our boys how to compete before they even understand what they're competing for. You'll see this in the playground where they learn that those who are the strongest get the attention. In the classroom, it's those who are the smartest. And in social circles, it's who's the funniest or the fastest or the best dressed or even the most fearless. And everything becomes this contest, even love. But here's what we rarely teach our boys. We really teach them how to be loved without performing, and how to be held without winning, and how to be known without having to earn it first. And this gap might seem subtle, even invisible, but it shapes everything. Because a boy who learns to compete but not to connect becomes a man who might win admiration but never feel quite known. And deep down, he starts to believe that if he ever stopped performing, then no one's going to stay or stick around. And that belief becomes his prison. See, competition goes masquerading around like masculinity. And from very early on, boys are socialized to compete, not just in sports or in academics, but in their identity. I mean, who's more dominant? Who gets more attention? Who can one up the other one with their stories of or achievements or even their risk? And vulnerability gets pushed out of the picture. And softness, in essence, becomes a liability. Collaboration is tolerated, but hierarchy is preferred. And in this structure, relationships become transactional. What do you offer that makes you valuable? And so the boy learns that, that you are only wanted if you are useful, or that you're only respected if you can outperform all those around you, or that you are only noticed if you can dominate, and you're only loved maybe if you can win, but never just because you exist. And this model of masculinity, it rewards those who wear the mask. And slowly the boy behind it fades. And so they're admired, but they're not necessarily known. See, a man raised to compete often reaches adulthood with accomplishments and applause, but a gnawing ache inside as well. He he may be respected and he may be followed. He may even be envied, but he still doesn't feel seen or known because all that validation was aimed at the version of him that performs well under pressure, but not the version that breaks down in the silence. He does not know how to let others into his inner world, not because he's broken, but it's because no one has ever taught him that it was even safe to do so in the first place. So he collects trophies and accolades and checklists, but he goes to sleep wondering, would anyone stay if I stopped winning? Would anyone love me if I didn't wear this mask? And that question is what continues to haunt him. And boys are withheld as a result from this experience of tenderness. From the very moment that they're told to man up, they begin to associate love with suppression. And the boy who cries too much is told that he's weak. And one who asks for reassurance, he's told he's being needy. And the one who reaches out, they get ignored or even shamed. And over time, he learns that tenderness comes with great risk. And so he stops asking and he toughens up and he becomes one of the guys. But the cost is extremely high. He, in essence, starts to associate connection with punishment and intimacy with humiliation and expressing emotion with social exile. And so he builds walls and smiles through the pain and masks his jokes and silence when he has needs. And even when someone offers real care, he doesn't even know how to receive it because that tenderness that he needed was never taught. It was instead withheld. And so there's this silent grief of a connection that was lost. You see, when boys are taught only to compete, they grow up grieving something that they can't always name. And it's this grief of lost friendships, those early and open bonds that faded when vulnerability became dangerous. It's the grief of never being asked how they really feel. It's the grief of never learning how to ask for help without shame. And it's this grief of seeing others receive love effortlessly and wondering, what's wrong with me? And that grief doesn't always look like sadness. It often looks like sarcasm or detachment or overachievement or even rage. But underneath it is this simple, lingering question, and that is, why can't I just be loved for who I am? And that ache is where a lot of incel ideology takes deep root. Not because these men are inherently toxic, but because they are unpracticed in being received without having to earn it in the first place. And and no one taught them how. And so when intimacy feels a lot like defeat, these men feel that. These men are trained to compare intimacy with a feeling of surrender, and letting someone in like that feels like you're losing ground. In essence, admitting emotional needs feels like you're forfeiting your status. And receiving love feels like you're becoming dependent. And again, that dependency feels a lot like danger. And so even when love becomes available, they sabotage it. Not because they don't want it, but because it's because they just don't know how to let it in. And they've been told, don't catch feelings, right? Um, keep your cool. Don't let them see under the surface. Never need anyone too much. And so they date while they're holding back, and they smile while withholding their pain, and they keep score instead of actually letting go. They want intimacy, but they want it on their terms, and those terms often exclude vulnerability. But intimacy does not work like that, does it? It's not something that you win. No, intimacy is something that you open up to. And for many men, that feels terrifying because no one showed them how to experience that. But here's how boys learn that being chosen means they're winning in life. Let's look a little closer at what so many of our boys are taught, implicitly or outright, about relationships. They're told that if you want to be chosen, you need to stand out. If you want to matter, you need to win. If you want to love, you need to earn it. And so it's no surprise that many boys grow up thinking of dating and connection as a competition. And who are they competing against? Well, they're competing against everyone, right? They're competing against the taller guy, the guy who's richer, the one who's more confident, the one who gets the laughs and the stares and all the yeses. It's this scoreboard mentality, right? Where every reaction becomes proof that you're falling behind, and every success it feels temporary. Because if love is something that you win, then it's also something that you can lose. And that fear eats you alive. It turns connection into a conquest, and it turns intimacy into insecurity. And then there's this collapse after any success that they might experience. See, here's what rarely gets talked about. Even the men who win under this system, these are the ones, for example, who become admired or the ones who are attractive or impressive, they often find that it doesn't really satisfy them. They get they get the dates, they get the applause, they get the attention maybe, and then what? Then they realize that they don't feel seen yet. They don't feel safe. They don't feel like they can stop performing. Because if someone actually loves the mask that they're wearing, then who will love the person underneath that mask? And the collapse after success is so disorienting. I mean, you spend years chasing this prize only to find that it doesn't make you feel any more loved. And if you've built your entire identity around competition, then you don't know how to shift toward connection. You're skilled in pursuit, perhaps, but not necessarily in presence. And that gap becomes unbearable. And there's this danger of admiration without intimacy. There's a difference between being admired and being truly loved. Admiration says, you're impressive, but love says, you're enough. Admiration wants you to believe that others like what you do, whereas love wants you to believe that others cherish you just as you are. And yet, many men are stuck chasing admiration because that's the only form of attention that they've been taught to value. And you see the problem? The problem is admiration doesn't feed the soul. It just inflates the ego, but it leaves the heart starving. And over time, you start to feel hollow. You start to wonder, do they even know who I am? Would they still want me if I were to drop this act? I mean, what happens when I'm no longer impressive? And that's when men retreat or sabotage or start chasing something that is newer and louder or maybe even more validating. Not because they're heartless, but more so because they learned to stay. And here's what it means to be received. I want to talk just about this because it's so foreign to men who are raised in this world of competition. This sense of being received or experiencing what it's like, it means that someone lets you show up without needing to change or prove or fix everything or anything around you. It means your presence is welcomed and not evaluated. It means that your story is heard but not compared. It means that your emotions are felt but not edited. And for a man that's used to competition, being received feels suspicious. And so you wonder, what do they want from me? Or are they just being polite? Or what happens if I tell them how I really feel? But being received is this doorway to healing because it teaches your nervous system that something that you perform isn't going to compare. It teaches you that you are lovable without having to earn it. And that lesson is often the first step into the incel mindset. Not instant connection, but into capacity or connection. See, there's a shame around wanting to be loved that so many men struggle with. Men aren't just taught to compete, they're actually taught to hide the fact that they want to even be loved in the first place. They might say things like, I'm good on my own, I'm focused on my goals, or I don't need anyone. But beneath that bravado is often a fragile truth. The truth is, it says, I'm scared that no one will ever want me, or I don't know how to be chosen without chasing others, or I'm ashamed of how badly I want to be seen. And that shame becomes their armor. And that armor becomes an identity. And so you start defining yourself not just by your independence, but also by your rejection of that need itself. And so you decide it's better to numb than to feel. It's better to detach than to reach. It's better to mock than to love and risk not receiving it. But here's what you already know deep down, I believe. That is not the experience of what peace is. That is a form of protection. And you deserve more than a life that's built around fear of being too much. So, what we need to do is redefine strength as receptivity. See, strength has been defined for many boys as stoicism, as control, or even invulnerability. But what if real strength is something else entirely? What if real strength is this ability to stay open in the face of uncertainty, or to receive care without questioning your masculinity, or even to admit need without apologizing for it? Receptivity isn't a weakness, it's maturity. It means that you've done the work to create emotional safety inside of yourself so that when someone shows up, especially with love, you don't flinch, you don't push them away, you don't minimize that experience, and you don't try to test it. You simply receive it. And in that receiving, you create a space for mutual healing. You let the child inside of you, the one who is never taught how to be loved, you let that child inside of you finally be held. In that moment, that's masculinity in its most powerful form of expression. But here's why some men start to resent experiencing love. See, when a man spends his entire life chasing love and never quite receiving it, there's a shift that happens for him. That desire that was once full of hope, it turns bitter. And then longing becomes cynicism, and reaching becomes a retreat. And eventually he begins to resent the very thing that he once ached for. He sees people in love and he rolls his eyes. He hears about vulnerability and he calls that weakness. He watches others receive affection and decides that they must have lied or cheated or manipulated to receive that. Because if he couldn't access it, despite trying as hard as he could, then love must be faked or rigged, or it must be reserved for someone else. And this is how many men fall into the red pill or the incel ideology. They weren't born angry, they were born hungry. But hunger denied long enough becomes grief, and grief unprocessed becomes rage. And it's not always explosive. It's often quiet, sarcastic, detached, and even ironic. But underneath it all is still that same cry. Why doesn't anyone choose me just for being me? And so competitive masculinity is expressed and fosters the incel ideology. See, incel ideology is often centered around competition. It's a Chad versus the betas, the winners versus the losers, the selected versus those who are ignored. And it's this ranking system or scoreboard or even a hierarchy of pain. And within that framework, love becomes the trophy. It becomes something you either are worthy of or you're eternally denied. And this worldview, it turns dating into the war zone that we've spoke about in past episodes. And every compliment is proof of your ranking, and every rejection is confirmation of your loss. And every woman becomes your judge, and every other man becomes a rival. And there's no room for grace in this. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for growth. There's just winners and losers. just competition between the two. But love does not work like that because real connection is not about domination, it's instead about resonance. And you can't resonate while you're trying to outscore someone else. You can't connect while you're keeping score. Um, you can't be loved while you're hiding behind a label that tells you that you're unlovable. And so we have many missed opportunities for male friendships in this process. This is like one of the tragic outcomes of teaching boys to compete from a very young age is that they often miss out on deep and life-giving male friendships. Because when every guy is your rival and you don't feel safe for being vulnerable around them, and when hierarchy rules and softness becomes ammunition, when emotional need is seen as a weakness and brotherhood becomes banter and not bonding, there are significant impacts. And so many men are starving, not just for romantic love, but also for the friendship that touches the soul. Friendship where you can cry without apology. Friendship where you're checked on without having to earn it. Friendships where you can say, I feel empty, and you're met with care and not confusion. But those kind of friendships are not built on competition. They're instead built in courage. Courage to go first, courage to be seen, and the courage to stay. And often those friendships are where the healing truly starts because they remind men that you are not alone and you were never meant to carry this by yourself. But here's what real intimacy feels like. And here's also why it's so hard to believe that it exists. For, for the man who's only known admiration or rejection, intimacy feels very much like a myth. He hears words like emotional safety or mutual support or unconditional care, and his first instinct is skepticism because it doesn't match his experience. Maybe the first time he opened up, someone laughed. Or perhaps the first time that he trusted someone, they left. Or maybe he never even got the chance to experience those. And so when someone finally offers love, not for his performance, but for his presence, he has no idea what to do. He freezes or he dismisses that experience or he sabotages it. Not because he's incapable of love, but more so because he's unfamiliar with being loved in the first place. But real intimacy is not fireworks. It's not perfection. It's a slow softening. It's eye contact that says, I'm with you. It's hands that don't flinch. It's a silence that feels like safety and not judgment. And yes, it's rare, but it's real. And it's possible for you. Receiving love without having to earn it is a challenging proposition. The hardest shift for many men is this very thing. It's letting love in before they've proven themselves. No accomplishments, no transformation, no checklists, just you being you as you are, messy and learning and wounded and honest. This feels wrong at first. It feels undeserved. It feels unsafe. But it's the only kind of love that truly nourishes you. Because, because it's the kind of love that's not tied to performance. That love is always very fragile. That love will keep you striving and apologizing and doubting. But the love that you want to experience is the one that sees you in your rawness and says, you don't have to earn me. That's the love that rebuilds your nervous system. And it says, you're not too much, or you're not a project, you're not a burden, you're already enough. That kind of love is not magic. No, it's practice. It's learning how to receive without rushing to repay. It's a breathing instead of proving kind of a love. It's a letting someone hold you without turning that into a debt or something you have to check off. And here's why we must teach our next generation of boys differently. This isn't just about healing the current wounds, it's about preventing future ones as well. If we keep raising boys to chase validation through performance, we're going to keep raising men who are lonely, men who are defensive and emotionally starved. What we need to teach them instead is we need to teach them that being chosen is not about winning. Instead, it's about resonating. And that love is not a prize, it's a process. And that being the strongest does not mean you have to be alone. That emotional fluency is not a liability, it's actually a superpower. And if we want men to build relationships that are honest and mutual and healing, then we have to give them the tools to do so. And those tools don't come from dominance. They instead come from connection. They come from intimacy expressed. They come from solid, deep roots of integrity.